Well, it's that time again. Time to talk about the first 4 episodes of any TV show and decide whether or not to continue or not with 4 episode opinions. And today I'm actually going to be doing it on a new show, a new series. Just came out, not an old one, and it's from the creator of Family Guy. Anyways, the creator of Family Guy, Seth MacFarlane, cut that out! As I was saying, Seth MacFarlane, who created Family Guy and Ted and a lot of these other IPs, decided that he wants to do a spin on Star Trek entirely. And here is what I see from the first 4 episodes I'm watching it. And it's gotten pretty close, seeing as how, like, today's the day that the 5th episode will air on Fox. But anyways, what we've got going on here is that it starts out with Seth MacFarlane's character Ed, who winds up inheriting a ship called the Orville. And to make matters worse, his ex-wife decides to be beside him as co-captain. I forget what it is in the Next Generation. It's been a while, but I only see us like select episodes a month. But essentially, the Orville it's essentially like Star Trek Next Generation or any of those shows where they wind up finding something, they wind up discovering some uncharted or misadventures that goes on within the ship. That is essentially what, at least from an outsider's view, what the Star Trek franchise is. At least to Next Generation. I haven't seen any other iterations like Deep Space Nine, Voyager, Enterprise, or even the recent new one, Discovery. Is it called? Yeah, Discovery. But essentially, the Orville is like Star Trek from the perspective of Seth MacFarlane and a couple of other writers. Not only is he the creator of the show, but at times he's also the director, but he's also the main lead, much like how he is in Ted, as well as Family Guy, of course. But essentially the Orville has them going on a lot of adventures. The first one is setting up our characters and they go among their way without trying to damage the ship. The second episode is where, like, and these are spoilers for those who don't want to see it or at least want to know what I think about them. The second episode, Command Performance, is kind of like the original pilot for Star Trek, where the captain winds up getting stuck on this planet and there's no way he can get off unless the crew comes in to help. Which, of course, it's sort of the same way in this, but the turnout is much more hilarious and worth checking out. The other one is essentially about, and this is a touchy subject here, trying to make a girl a boy, because in this, their equivalent of Worf, they're not allowed to have girls. At least they're not allowed to have women as part of their species, so if it winds up being a girl, then their genders get swapped out. Yeah, and I might have offended a couple of people there. And of course the last one for this 4 episode, for this episode that I just saw, The Stars Should Appear, is essentially like, well, I don't know what episode of Star Trek to compare it with, but essentially the Orville winds up coming across this total, like, spaceship that's drifting among the planet as the crew goes to investigate and finds out that there's, like, a liberal control over the planet. Or at least there's a big firm control over it, and nobody dare step in to try to take command under it. But the turnouts in the episodes are pretty funny, and even partially at times it's got itself some really good character development. Well, not really character development, but more or less an understanding of it's Star Trek, except it's by Seth MacFarlane. There are people who have said the Orville is pretty much one of the few great Star Trek lookalikes on Fox right now. It's got a 7.5 out of 10 on IMDb, 8.1 on TV.com, but Rotten Tomatoes has appeared with 20%. With Rotten Tomatoes saying the Orville is an odd jumble of campiness and sincerity, homage, and satire, the Orville never quite achieves liftoff. Other people have given the 7 out of 10 for the Orville, and even 90% of the audiences do like the series. I like where where the first 4 episodes is going. It's kind of interesting. It's funny as anything show. Usually I don't get a lot of laughs out of certain things. I mean, parts of it I may find funny, but I'm sitting down quietly watching to get opinions through. But essentially, there was a couple of jokes that actually made me laugh my head off. It's surprisingly really that good, and even some of the stuff they make references to is pretty funny. I mean, good calamity. I haven't seen much more of the references of movies or TV specials than I have with Ted. And yes, that is one of McFarlane's projects. Now that I've talked about what the Orville is like, at least from my perspective, a big decision now comes along, and that question is, should I continue watching the Orville? Is it worth watching Seth MacFarlane and all these other recurring guest stars, other people that may appear in the show, be worth it? Well, I'm probably not the only one that's going to say this yet. But it's worth continuing. I may be odd when I say it, but I think the Orville is worth continuing. At least to see where all of this goes, because the Orville is a big, big show. I mean, it's got a lot of feet going for it, and it'd be interesting to see where all of it leads, if Fox didn't screw up the advertising for it. But it's also kind of essentially, at least from McFarlane's perspective, is that the Orville is inspired by Twilight Zone and Star Trek, which I've already mentioned Star Trek before. Other than that, I'd have to say it's worth continuing. I mean, I look forward to see what they've got going on for the Orville, and for those that actually want to see the episodes, you can see them on any platform possible, Amazon Video, Hulu, Fox.com. You can even see it, at least according to your local schedule, on Fox Thursdays. If not, then it'd be another time. But here where I am, it comes on Thursdays on Fox, right after Gotham at 8. So we've got a lot here to discuss with the Orville, but I don't want to bore you with the details. But with that in mind, hopefully you might find opinions on the Orville, but I also kind of want to ask, is this really one of the things that you'll like out of this? If you have seen Star Trek and you are looking at this series from a viewpoint, what are your thoughts on it? And entirely, what are your opinions on the Star Trek franchise? To probably quickly get this one out of the way, I watched the first 2 series when they were on Netflix, the original series and The Next Generation. I mean, I just finished The Next Generation in, April, so that was enough right there. But, honestly, I only had the first 2 series in mind of watching. I have a friend who is into Star Trek, and he says Deep Space Nine is worth the watch because of continuity, but I only signed up to watch the first 2. I haven't seen anything else of the Star Trek franchise, and a quick answer to your question, no, I'm not going to review Star Trek Discovery, just because I don't have CBS All Access, and another factor of the mix is, I don't think it's worth it to shell out $12 for a subscription service that I'm not going to view like 5 minutes of on, or at least review one, or at least, sorry, one show. It's not worth waiting till one show to actually watch. Never mind the rambling around. I enjoy the Orville, I will continue it, and I hope to see you guys down the line for all new videos. So, see you guys.